What is the greatest "fuck it, I'll do it myself" in history? Juan Pujol Garcia was a Spaniard who created his own counterintelligence operation for the Allies during World War II. Initially, he approached British and American intelligence offering them his services, but both countries rebuffed him. Undeterred, Garcia created a fictional persona as a pro-fascist Spanish official and got himself recruited by the Nazis, who directed him to travel to Britain to recruit agents. Instead, Garcia created a network of fictitious agents and sub-agents using publicly available information, like newspapers and travel brochures. It was at this point that he again contacted Allied intelligence and was finally recruited. Garcia continued his work throughout the war and received both a knighthood from the British and the Iron Cross for the same operation. The Nazis never realized that he was a double agent. Dashrath Manji is a man who single-handedly cut a mountain in half in order to make a passage between his tiny village and the city on the other side of the mountain. He did this because you would have to either climb or go around the mountain to get to the doctor. His wife was wounded and died while he was trying to fetch the doctor. He vowed to not rest until he could make a passageway for the doctor to easily reach the village. It took him 22 years, but he turned a 55-kilometer journey into a 15-kilometer journey. He had help from time to time, but many thought him insane, but it worked. Unfortunately, it was only after his death in 2007 that the government got its ass together and built more roads and made the pass safer. In 2016, he was honored with a set of stamps bearing his personage. He sacrificed so much to help the village he loved. In the Indian mathematician Ramanujan's early life, he posted a question on how to solve a specific infinite equation in the Journal of the Indian Mathematical Society. After not getting a reply for 6 months, he just solved it himself. He was essentially self-taught. Undoubtedly one of the most brilliant minds to have ever lived on this planet, he could immediately see connections and relationships that other skilled mathematicians couldn't. He claimed that many of his proofs were divinely revealed to him in dreams. He essentially invented his own conventions in mathematics and spent a long time sending out his findings to professional mathematicians, but most ignored him, thinking that he was writing nonsense because most of it went over their heads. A mathematician named G.H. Hardy finally recognized his potential and had him brought to Britain. He became a fellow of both the Royal Society and of Trinity College at Cambridge. Without formal schooling, during some of the worst parts of British imperialism in India, a century after his death, mathematicians are still analyzing his notes and finding new identities and theorems. He also laid the groundwork mathematics for elliptic curve theory, which has brought us both cryptography and the proof for Fermat's last theorem. So you have him to thank, at least in part, for the internet. When Teddy Roosevelt wanted to be in the army to fight in the Spanish-American War, but they wouldn't take him since he was pretty much blind. So he became a volunteer for the US Army and created a unit made up of rich playboys that he went to school with and a bunch of cowboys he became friends with when he went on a soul-finding journey. They used a private yacht to go overseas. Do what you can with what you have where you are. Teddy Roosevelt Nice Post. How about Dr. Giles Brindley? Giles Skay Brindley, MDFRS, born April 30th, 1926, is a British physiologist, musicologist, and composer, known for his contributions to the physiology of the retina and color vision, treatment of erectile dysfunction, and is perhaps best known for an unusual scientific presentation at the 1983 Las Vegas meeting of the American Urological Association, where he removed his pants to show the audience his chemically induced erection and invited them to inspect it closely. He had injected phenoxybenzamine using 1 milliliter into his penis in his hotel room before the presentation. Yeah, everyone gather around and look at my pee-pee. Look, see, it's all chemically induced. Yeah, go on. Touch it. Tug. Yeah, don't stop. Thor Heyerdahl, a Norwegian adventurer and ethnographer, went on the Kon-Tiki expedition in 1947 to prove the Norwegian embassy that it was possible the Polynesian islands were populated from ancient civilizations from South America. So he and his 3 friends constructed a simple raft of wooden logs and sailed from South America to the Pacific Islands only using the currents in the Pacific. Oh, and they documented the whole expedition and later won an Oscar. Jerry Nielsen Fitzgerald, a doctor who treated herself for breast cancer for months while stationed at the South Pole in 1999, and then when the weather thawed a bit was flown out in a daring rescue mission, gave herself an extra decade of life. Although the cancer eventually did get her in the end, I have always hugely admired her willingness to say, "Fuck it, gonna save my own life with the help of a welder." Welder had practiced by poking a needle into a shriveled apple helped Dr. Fitzgerald perform a biopsy by aspirating tissue from her breast. A maintenance worker prepared the slides for video transmission, and a computer technician synchronized the transmission with a satellite passing overhead. They then shipped chemo to her. Doing your own cancer treatment is a supreme, fuck it, I'll do it myself, at the South Pole. Stanislav Petrov, manning a Soviet missile defense system during a very tense period of the Cold War, looked at an alert from the computer that claimed that the US had just launched nukes at the USSR, said, fuck it, this computer is wrong? I'll decide if we're being attacked. And I decide no, and didn't sound the alarm for a counterattack against his standing orders. He was correct, and single-handedly stopped the Cold War from becoming a nuclear war. First, the system detected only one missile, so he rejected that, because first strike would be hundreds of missiles, but then later, 4 missiles were detected, from beyond the range the Russian radars could detect. But again, 4 missiles wasn't enough, and the radars that were detecting them couldn't detect missiles from so far away. Okay, so it's time for me to talk about Juan Pujol Garcia. A hotel clerk and former unsuccessful chicken farmer was frustrated with the fascist government of Spain. And Germany's warmongering was getting scary. France had fallen, the USSR and USA were both neutral so far, and only Britain was left to stand against the Nazis. As he said years later, he believed he had to do something for the good of humanity, even though, by all accounts, he was a nobody. Just a hotel clerk and failed chicken farmer who'd briefly served on both sides of the Spanish Civil War, leaving with a dislike of fascism and communism both. So Juan naturally decided to become a spy and fuck over Hitler as hard as he could. Logical career move for a hotel clerk, I'm sure you'll agree. But the British, who he wanted to help, weren't interested. He'd asked to help at the embassy in Madrid several times. The Brits were all like, "Who are you?" "Actually, never mind, we don't care. You can't do shit to help us, and we don't really trust you, so scram." Juan, of course, was undeterred. He decided that the Nazis had to be destroyed, and he figured it would be easier to do so from within. So he reinvents himself as a fanatically fascist government official and applies to help the Germans spy on the Brits, claiming he has a way to actually get undercover to Britain to spy on them. All of this is utter bullshit, of course. The Germans say, sure, we could use the help, and hire him. Since he can't get to Britain, he goes to Lisbon, Portugal, frequenting the library to learn about Britain so he can convincingly just make shit up. He sends the German Navy on a wild goose chase for a non-existent naval convoy at the Mediterranean island of Malta. The Germans are convinced he's the best spy they have in Britain. After all, the rest of them keep getting captured, except for the ones Garcia is recruiting. Or rather, inventing. His recruits were as real as the Maltese convoy, which is to say, not even a little real. They did make good fall guys to blame when his intel was off. The Brits, meanwhile, are looking for him, since the German codes they were breaking showed the Germans allegedly had a spy setting up a spy ring in Britain. But then they read his messages. Juan allegedly had a Scottish contact who would do anything for a liter of wine. That tipped the Brits off that someone was just fucking with German intel. I mean, metric system? Anyone? A Scotsman who drinks wine? Unrealistic. So eventually the Lisbon British Embassy tipped off MI6 that this guy in Lisbon was trying to tell them he was literally a German intelligence agent and would like to help fight the Nazis, please. So they brought him to Britain and gave him the codename Agent Garbo. He teamed up with MI6 where he continued to bullshit the Nazis with a combination of pure lies, true but useless intel, and useful intel that arrived just a bit too late to help the Germans at all. He convinced the Germans D-Day was a feint, not the main Allied invasion. That would come farther east at Calais, he convinced the Germans. The 1st U.S. Army Group led by General Patton would lead it. The 1st U.S. Army Group was made of divisions that didn't exist, in an empty base with inflated fake tanks and airplanes to convince German planes flying above Dover. Think it was legit. The Germans kept a large number of troops and tank divisions back at Calais to repel an invasion force which never landed. These troops could have stopped the Allied landings at Normandy. Instead, they sat at Calais doing nothing. The Germans gave Pujol the Iron Cross Second Class for his essential aid to the Nazi regime. The British government soon after made him a member of the Order of the British Empire. His German spy handler gave him his Iron Cross in person after the war, apologizing profusely for failing to win the war he'd helped them so much with. I imagine it was difficult to keep a straight face for that conversation. TLDR, failed chicken farmer from Spain, wages personal war of lies against Nazi Germany and wins. Sir Nicholas Winton, who was a British man during the 1900s who helped saved around 669 children, if mostly Jewish origin get from Czechoslovakia to Britain before the start of WW2. He was just a broker who kept up on the news from Czechoslovakia, I think. But from what I remember, he went all the way to Prague and tried to figure out what he could do. I watched an interview, and it was a lot of forging of documents and blackmail that he did, I think, to get the children into Britain. He didn't say anything about it for the next 50 years he served in the army as well. During WW2, this is a fuck it. If no one is going to help these kids, then I will, in my opinion. Sadly, I think there was another train full of 200 more kids, but it didn't get to depart because the war started that day. Most all the kids who he saved, their parents died in camps like Auschwitz. And that probably included those 200 kids that never got on the train. He found the kids he did save, people willing to adopt them. This was known as the Czech Kindertransport, German for children's transport, and he was knighted as well by the Queen. Thus is why he is Sir Nicholas Winton. There's a movie called Nicky's Family about it, as well as a 60 Minutes on him. He died in 2015 at the age of 106, but not without meeting a lot of the children who are now adults. There was one sad part I saw in an interview with one of the children, is that his parents had told him that he was going to go to a trip to the UK alone, and then they would join him a few months later. He never realized this was the last time he'd see his parents, and he was asked what his parents looked like. Were they scared, panicked, sad? I think he said he asked this question to himself many times, and I think he ultimately said they were calm, I think. But this, in my opinion, is one of the big, fuck it, I'll do it myself. Medicine has a few of these. Jonas Salk, when he needed test subjects for the polio vaccine, looked around and decided he'd make a fine test subject. Well, he and his family, so maybe that's not the best example. The best example, after all, is Werner Forssmann. The year is 1929, and the conventional wisdom among the medical community is that sticking things into your heart will kill you. Which, you know, as far as wacky things people once believed goes, is really a reasonable thing to assume. When people are shot through the heart, for instance, and not in the metaphoric way that gives love a bad name, they tend to die. Now, if you could pierce the heart, you'd be able to deliver medicine that way to people that otherwise couldn't take it intravenously. Years later, what happens next is instrumental to doctors Clarence Dennis and Richard Varco in 1950 developing cardiac bypass, and 2 years after that, in 1952, Dr. F. John Lewis performing the world's first open heart surgery. Werner, of course, didn't have quite that much prescience, but even being able to inject dyes into people's hearts and then x-ray them, an idea he did have, was revolutionary. Werner knew what the rewards were, but he also, of course, knew what the risks were. He wouldn't violate his Hippocratic oath, and this sort of thing was fatal to a career in medicine. In fact, when he pulled off what I'm about to tell you, he was actually disciplined and shunned by the cardiac community. He was forced to retrain as a urologist, where this sort of thing was more acceptable, a profession he was in for the rest of his life. There was no way he could get his hospital's board to approve something like this, not with a live patient. So he convinced a nurse by the name of Gerda Dietzen to help him sneak into the hospital and perform a procedure in which he would run a catheter through a vein in the arm, right into a human heart. She agreed on one condition, that the test be performed on her. Werner wasn't about to kill another human being if he was wrong, though. After she sat down in a chair and he'd tied her arm down to prep for the operation, he quickly ran into a back room while she was restrained, ran the catheter into his own arm all the way down into his own heart, and snapped an X-ray photo to prove that the catheter had made it all the way in. And that's why we have heart surgery. Share your opinion in the comments and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories.